Welcome everybody to round 4 of the World Magic Cup Qualifier. We're here, myself, Ray Punzlin, along with Adrian Sullivan, just about to watch Christian Calcano and Miles Reed jump into the action.
Starts out the way many of these games in standard start out, a little bit of looking on top, and then saying go. Now, the slow play is what's going to be preferred by blue-white, certainly, but this black deck from Miles Reed, the traditional black devotionalist, it's not afraid to be playing slower either. Underworld Connections is going to be a card that it will try to use to keep up with the card drawing from the blue-white list. We see Pack Rat, last breath immediately.
And if you missed earlier, Miles is not playing that Temple of Deceit just for extra Skyland. He is splashing blue for a couple cards in his sideboard.
Azorius Guildgate from Christian Calcano. Game 1 in this matchup is often very difficult for the black deck, primarily because they just have so many removal spells and so few targets. It's pretty easy to get overwhelmed by the card draw. We see here Thoughtseize shows Jace's Ingenuity, another actual factual Jace, Syncopate, Azorius Charm, and Plains.
So looking at this hand, what do you think is the most important piece for Miles to take down?
Well, honestly, in this matchup, the card draw cards are the ones that matter the most. Properly played by the blue-white player, a Jace represents kind of a slow opportunity. And I would say Jace because it could hit next turn. And that would be a card that would potentially pull Christian Calcano out of the ability to be disrupted properly by Miles Reed. And remember, Miles only has 4 Thoughtseize in his main deck to be able to create any real disruption.
It looks like Miles might be thinking between Jace's Ingenuity as we see a Hero's Downfall in Miles' hand. And he does end up taking the Jace's Ingenuity.
Yeah, even having that answer to the Jace, I still don't enjoy the play of letting the Jace live, because it's still 3 cards. It's still the Hero's Downfall and the 2 cards you can get from the Jace itself.
No cycling of that Azorius Charm.
See a Dissolve was drawn by Christian Calcano. We'll see Jace. Here he comes. Immediately starts at 2. Gives some choices to Miles Reed. 2 land and a Supreme Verdict. That's a Temple, a Hallowed Fountain, and a Supreme Verdict. It looks like we're going to go lands or no. That was a good split, actually. He goes with the lands.
So now Miles' next turn, probably going to have to deal with the Jace. Can't just let it sit there. He could play his Desecration Demon, but most likely, I think he's going to handle that Jace right away?
Well, it's anybody's question here. I mean, he didn't see the Supreme Verdict taken. The Supreme Verdict went to the bottom, so he might just decide to drop a demon while he can.
No.
Either of those options have reasons behind them. I'm curious to see where Miles is going to go.
He does know about that Azorius Charm, so for one temporary answer, at least, at a demon.
And he says dead Jace.
All right.
Yeah, I guess I feel pretty... that choice between Jace's Ingenuity and the Jace, it was the same amount of card advantage, except for it stole away Miles' 4th turn here and gave Christian a play on turn 4. I think that's the kind of thing where if you're a blue-white player, that's what you want to see happen. You want to see the game go a little bit deeper like that.
And more importantly, he didn't even have that 5th land yet. If the chances he missed, Calcano might not have been able to cast that Jace's Ingenuity right away.
We see a demon. We know that there's a Syncopate. We know that there's a Dissolve. And it's going to be a Sync for 1. Yeah. And an Azorius Charm to draw a card.
And this is the exact type of game Calcano's probably looking for.
Yeah, and game 1, it's going to be very advantage to the blue-white deck. And even though this is not an Elixir build, it still has such abundant resources for card advantage.
So Miles looked like he drew a Pack Rat for the turn.
And we're going to
lead off
see
with
if the path is clear with the Thoughtseize. He does not know about the Dissolve yet. Dissolve. And to the top. Follow up with the Rat.
All right. So Calcano, what did he keep on top here? We'll peep right now.
I think... Well, we'll see. He's guarding his hand pretty well.
A Sphinx Revelation.
Sphinx's Revelation. Main phase here for 4. already laid a land.
Why do you think that he did it on the main phase? He laid a land already. Is there any particular reason you'd think he'd do it on the main phase there?
He might have his reasons. And Miles Reed draws a card. Looks like a land. This is 5th land. That makes his Gray Merchant castable, but there is a Pack Rat in play, and the Pack Rat likes to eat on things. What's it going to nibble on? Now, I used to say that Pack Rat was a liability against blue-white, but that was when all the blue-white decks ran Detention Sphere. And Christian Calcano is a Detention Sphere deck. Every little bit of investment into this Pack Rat, when Christian's already at such a high level of life, is just going to be a possibility of either a D-Sphere or a Supreme Verdict really causing some problems. It's a very hard decision to make about Pack Rat when you're playing against those kinds of cards.
And Miles decides not to play into either of those cards, just coming in for one with Pack Rat. Calcano did draw the Detention Sphere for his turn, though. So I know his hand consists of Detention Sphere, the Sphinx Revelation, not sure what else, but still in very good position this game for him.
Yeah, and that Temple of Enlightenment, keeping a card on top, when you're on the opposite side of the board, that always feels pretty bad. 4 mana, is that going to be another Jace? Just a Verdict. 3 mana open.
Figures he's going to do it regardless, so just jams a Verdict out there. And Gray Merchant comes down. So yeah, Miles is looking at, let's see, Desecration Demon and Gray Merchant in his hand. Where Calcano seems like he just has everything he needs, and we'll be getting more right now with...
That's Elspeth with Dissolve mana and a Dissolve in hand.
Happy times for Calcano.
This game will probably be over fairly quickly. Only 2 cards in hand. The Gray Merchant, pretty anemic versus a Elspeth.
And the Desecration Demon, same reason. Those tokens will sacrifice themselves readily to keep that to keep the Desecration Demon tapped.
Mutavault. The Demon.
All right.
And Miles attacking for 2 it probably. Thinking about it.
Decides against it.
Says go. And Calcano had that Dissolve, doesn't even care. He's like, no, that's fine. That Demon is fine.
He's probably only worried about 1 card. Probably Hero's Downfall, or if there's any other way to get rid of Elspeth, it's probably more...
Bile Blight would be another card that he would care about.
Yeah. Where he could be able to get through.
And let's pretend that he's slightly worried about Bile Blight. If he wanted to, he could minus his Elspeth now as a hedge against that. That is, in fact, what he does. Goodbye, Demon. Yeah, he's fine to just sit there. He doesn't need to start accumulating the army just yet.
And Miles, just another swamp for his turn. So looking real grim for Miles here as he just sits with a Gray Merchant and swamp in his hand.
Yeah, game 1, the abundance of creature removal from the black deck is just a real problem in this matchup. They don't have enough cards that can interact with what the blue-white deck's plan is. However, in game 2, so many cards come into the mix, like Notion Thief, 2 Erebos, 3 Duress. He can even bring in Lifebane Zombie just as a good creature.
An extra,
Underworld Connections and 2 Negates. That's 13 reasonable cards to bring in.
And we'll take a peep a little later and see what Calcano does. He probably has a good idea of what Miles typically would bring in, except for the blue surprises. But I'm sure he has a little defense in his board as well. And we just see Miles just continue on with a Gray Merchant.
Yep. Take 4. I'll gain 4. And a pass.
Calcano has that Detention Sphere in his hands. Moves it to the front, and it looks like he drew. Was that an Aether?
That was an Aetherling. Remember, he's Battle Cruiser style. All the finishers, all the time.
More tokens coming out.
I know at some Grand Prix and other large events, players have used so many soldiers that the soldiers have run out. Hopefully, we won't have that problem here.
Hopefully not. I think we have lots of soldiers available for them. But if we get to that point, Calcano's probably in a very good position to win this game.
And here comes another Battle
6
Cruiser.
mana, And we'll see that Aetherlink with plenty of mana to protect itself.
Miles Reed untapping. Bile Blight.
He's a Bile Blight.
Look at that. He's excited. He's like, oh, I got a Bile Blight. That's going to be good.
And there's just that much. Bile Blight just doesn't do that much right now. Clears out the soldiers. Still have to deal with Aetherling. See what he decides to do here.
He looks like he's doing math. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. And the Gray Merchants play.
All right, so no Bile Blight. Is that a Banishing Light?
That is indeed a 1 Banishing Light as a 5th Detention Sphere style card from Christian Calcano's list.
So Calcano has a couple of options. At the very least, come in there with Aetherling most likely. Taps 3 mana here. Could this be Detention Sphere on the blockers?
I think he's thinking about it. He decides to start off +1.
Okay. Miles is probably all right with that.
Detention Sphere. Target a Gray Merchant.
All right, things are looking really grim for Miles.
Goodbye, Gray Merchants. All of the King's soldiers.
So we're looking at 10 damage coming through. Miles has the Bile Blight he could use. Aetherling can still get pumped. Bile Blight does finally come out.
And that pre-combat activation of Elspeth, a little bit of punishment there for it, but there's still an Aetherling coming.
Yeah, and we saw Calcano doesn't care anymore now that he has Aetherling in play. He's not as concerned about losing those tokens and everything.
It just really, honestly, the inevitability is still on his side as long as he has a card like that dissolve. So he just, pumps the Aetherling
3 times. Plays another land, and
I think he's going to flicker the Aetherling. End of the turn, and it comes back. And it's land and Desecration Demon in hand for Miles Reed.
So Miles, Swamp Desecration Demon just has the Mutavault in play. Just going to play the Demon, keep him playing it out, maybe try to gain a little more info on what type of deck Calcano is, though it seems very obvious what type of version he is right now. All right. Calcano starts off his turn, quickly plays a land.
And he says, no, none of that, Demon. You're just going to die. Aetherling's enough to kill you. And again, I actually really like that kind of decision-making. One of the reasons is that we already saw the Bile Blight, but you don't want to have the Demon actually not get tapped down because they Bile Blighted. Just get rid of the Demon, that's fine.
And then Calcano, if you missed that, it looks like he did shrink his Aetherling, right? Just to dodge the Elspeth activation there.
It's a nice play.
And then regrew him after he's able to get through. So Nightveil Spectre over for Miles.
This would have been a card great on turn 3. Not so great at this point. This is a card that even if Miles was at higher life would be worth thinking about dissolving. But Miles is right now 2 swings away from death with 2 finishers on the table. In a sense, Christian Calcano can start becoming a latter game aggro control deck. Just save that counter for anything that's going to stop the potential victory. Here it comes.
All right. Aetherling going to get it pumped a couple times. Looks like up to 7.
Make some guys. 7 power on the table, not counting the Mutavault. And flicker the Aetherling. Back it comes.
And Miles will probably look at his hand, and there's not really a card he could draw to make him happy here. And that looks like another land. So he scoops it up, and we're going to go to game 2.
So one of the things to note with Miles Reed's play, he put a Watery Grave into play. And showing the Watery Grave, that was necessary to cast his spells, but that means he is saying to Christian Calcano, I have spells that I'm going to cast. If it was just for temples, it would have been just temples. But that is an indication that there's some blue spells. So Christian Calcano should be aware there's probably the cards like Notion Thief, like Negate. Those cards are going to come on in. But then besides that, Erebos definitely coming on in. Duress definitely coming in. Underworld Connections definitely coming in. And I do like Lifebane Zombie just because that 3-power Intimidate creature and peek at the hand, that is just fine, even if it won't hit a creature.
Yeah, the blue edition just gives him more tools to beat the blue-white decks. He has a lot of the common mono-black tools that we see in the sideboard, but the addition of Notion Thief and Negate will really help Miles catch up in the next game.
Now, the interesting thing about Christian Calcano's list looks like it's primarily set up for regular aggressive matchups, for burn decks, and for the mirror. He's got 4 Nyx Fleece Ram, 3 Negate, 2 Archangel of Thune, 2 Dispel, 2 Reprisal, 1 Gainsay, 1 Faded Retribution. And
so what do you think he's going to bring here? Maybe Faded Retribution, that also gets enchantments, right?
No, Faded Retribution only gets Planeswalkers and creatures.
Planeswalkers and creatures. That's right.
I mean, I don't mind Faded Retribution, but the thing is, a 7 casting cost spell versus a lot of discard can be difficult. Now, there are 2 schools of thought on counter spells versus black control. One school of thought is that counter spells are mostly not very good because you won't be able to use them when you want to be able to use them. The other school of thought is you have to have counter spells to be able to stop the key card at the right time. So I'm curious which school Christian is in. I don't know. I know that I can imagine him bringing in Reprisal against Desecration Demon as a maybe. It only hits Desecration Demon is the problem. However, there aren't very many cards that he can use against Desecration Demon. He's got Detention Sphere, Supreme Verdict, Banishing Light, and done for his actual direct answers. Elspeth can, of course, be used against it. So, very likely to my mind, Reprisal isn't good enough. I'm not actually sure what I would want to sideboard in on here. I think it depends on whether or not he sees this as a deck to bring in Negate against or not.
I agree. There's not much other things in his board, like Nyx Fleece Ram, the red decks, Archangel of Thune. Maybe consider it because he knows there's less removal, but it's not that great.
Yeah, I mean, Archangel is a very powerful creature, but it's also a 5-drop creature that can be killed. And also, he can expect Lifebane Zombie is a real possibility, and Archangel can get nabbed by a Lifebane Zombie. Honestly, just looking at the way that this board is set up, I think it's very likely that Christian Calcano is in the I like counterspells against black camp. And if that's the case, I think what's most likely is that he's going to remove a couple of cards like maybe 1 or 2 Last Breath and remove a couple of Dissolves to reduce his curve and have the Dissolves move into Negates a little bit, but not all of them. Like -1 Last Breath, -2 Dissolve for +3 Negate. Now, personally, I'm of the I don't like counters very much against Black Devotion, so for me, this sideboard has nothing.
How about if you saw the blue, though, the Watery Graves and stuff? Are you going to lean towards, like, what blue cards could he be bringing in against me?
I would be really sure of Notion Thief and of Negate. Like, the thing is that fighting against that is so hard. You can't really bring in Gainsay for the Notion Thief.
Yeah.
And Dissolve is just one of those cards that's very expensive.
All right, players shuffling up right here. So they're just about to go to game 2. On the other table that we have going on, we also have that Josh McClain and Richard Wilson match. We'll go to that a little bit later if they're still playing, but it looks like that's just a green-white mirror.
That's the awesomest mirror.
So that'll be exciting to watch if we're able to catch a couple games here, but we still got this game ahead of us. Going into game 2 for those just joining us. In the booth right now is myself, Ray Punzalan, along with Adrian Sullivan, bringing you the WMCQ in Indianapolis.
Now, do remember that hashtag WMCQ, and you can follow all the WMCQ action going on all over the place.
All right. So a quick peep at Miles' hand. We do see one of his sideboard in Negates, Devour Flesh, Underworld Connections, Desecration Demon, and Assortment of Land.
Negate is one of those cards that is exactly covering a hole in the black plan versus blue-white. One of the things that black can do is say, no, you don't get to use that, you don't get to use that, you don't get to use that. I'm going to strip you of all of your options. But then they can't stop the top-decked card draw spell that undoes all of the work. Negate is the moment where that can be turned around.
Yeah, and we've seen that time and time again. No matter how many discard spells you draw, they could just peel that Sphinx to the top of their deck, and it's not going to even be close anymore. All that work undone quickly. Calcano going down to 6 cards here. Looks like Miles is very happy with his hand.
Underworld Connections is a card that you can outrace with blue-white. However, if you don't have Elixir, it can sometimes be hard to continually race because an Elixir build can essentially have Sphinx's Revelations for days. And these non-Elixir builds, they have to be kind of a little bit more careful about when they use their resources because they're never going to get them back.
Let's see if Calcano's happy with this 6 here. Can't tell too much. Jace, a couple lands. We'll see a couple more in a little bit, but he does keep his hand, and Miles leads off with a Watery Grave tapped. Calcano just leading off with a Temple. Peeps on top. Ooh, still thinking about this and decides to ultimately keep it on top there.
Gray Merchant. Temple.
Yeah, Miles, a Temple of his own. And he does keep it on top as well. So nothing too surprising here. The typical start from both decks, kind of slowly playing out lands until the exciting middle game starts happening, and then the really interesting late game. But
well, one of the things about the discard from Miles, he does not need it in this matchup until the mid game. A turn 1 discard is fine, but it doesn't really do very much. Whereas a turn 3 or 4 can sometimes be a preamble to a real problem card for the opponent. Underworld Connections just thrown out there, it works.
All right, and we could be seeing some a quicker game here now with Underworld Connections, able to build up resources.
Yep.
Let Miles trade off for any counters that Christian Calcano may have.
No Detention Sphere from Christian Calcano. This is a game that Miles looks to be actually a lot ahead on right now.
Yeah, and with that Negate in his hand, this Underworld Connections sounds like he'll be staying there for a while.
We see a Dissolve from Christian Calcano. There's a land, another card. This is like Phyrexian Arena. Here we go. Card a turn, card a turn. Fuel, fuel, fuel.
Draws the Thoughtseize. Has lands to play.
Let's see what you got. Here's the Thoughtseize. Looks like at least 2 Dissolves at least. Yep, 2 Dissolves. Aetherling, Jace, and Last Breath.
And the Untouchable Plains, of course. And like you were mentioning, more Thoughtseize in this type of game is more of mid-game. If you see it early, you kind of almost expect the pack rat to just follow up right away, but we're not going to see it in this game. It's going to be more card advantage with the Underworld Connections, just managing the threats that Calcano can throw down on him. What do you think he's going to be taking over here, though?
This is actually very interesting. I was about to say it was a choice between Aetherling and Jace, but the reason he might take the Aetherling is that the Aetherling is a card that, if it hits play, he has so few answers to as long as there's mana open. He's going to have sideboarded down his removal, and having less removal means Jace is going to, an Aetherling is going to be even harder to use 2 removal on to kill.
All right, so Miles lays out the Desecration Demon, lets it eat up a Dissolve. Calcano now most likely will be laying out this Jace that we saw. Draws a Supreme Verdict for his turn.
And there's the Jace, or pardon me, there's the Plains land for the turn. Important to note, Miles Reed laid a Mutavault last turn, so the Jace, if it gets minused, can be immediately killed for the mere cost of 2 mana. And I think Christian right here is thinking about whether or not he wants to allow that.
For today's
Oh, and he's just going to come in with Mutavault.
Attack for 2, leaving up Dissolve mana.
Sometime during the next 30 minutes or so. Come on up and we'll be happy to get that.
Also, the other reason we saw Aether Lane get taken away is that the gate. Jace could be a nice little target there for Miles.
Get your nice and safe draft card. Please come up and collect that now.
All right, so just Temple laid out, Peeps on top. So sitting in the hand with Devour Flash, Desecration Demon, Negate, and a Gray Merchant for Miles there. Couple options, see what he's going to do here. He knows there's at least another Dissolve in his hand. So it looks like he's trying to decide if this is the time to try to take it out of Calcano's hand or just pass along the turn, and goes with passing the turn. Calcano with a Mutavault for his turn.
Calcano, another Mutavault.
So he has that Jace option still. He could play Jace now and leave up. Did he have Negate in his hand as well?
There's a pass.
All right.
And a draw of a card. Every time that the turn passes and Miles gets to do that without anything happening on the other side is a good turn for Miles. Miles starts it out with a Pack Rat.
Calcano has a Supreme Verdict in his hand. Might not care about the Pack Rat. And a lot of times with the blue-white decks, Calcano could be just get that Sphinx Revelation and how kind of even it out with the Underworld connections he's been playing all day. But as long as Miles sits around with a Negate, plan's just not going to happen for him.
Waiting to see if Christian Calcano is going to do anything about it. And he doesn't, and then Miles passes the turn. And it looks like it's end of turn. Miles draws a card. And that was a land. If he had done that on his main phase, he instead of waiting till the end of the turn, he could have laid that land.
All right.
And I think what's happening is we're having a little pause here for Christian to potentially do something. And he doesn't, but I think that that's kind of what happened there. Swap hits play. Attack for 1, no blocks. Main phase, activate, discard this Devour Flesh, get a rat. Hit for 2. Will the rat get the cheese?
Now Calcano, Jace's Ingenuity.
This is a good spot for that negate. Obviously, you'd prefer to stop a Sphinx's Revelation, but you know what? That mass of cards is a part of what you can do as a blue-white player to beat the black decks.
Now, Calcano drew Elspeth for his turn, but it looks like he's just going to go with a Supreme Verdict. Yes, he does. He's going to leave open his Mutavault and another land. And Verdict will just eat the 2 Pack Rat tokens.
Another card for Miles.
Unanswered connections just making things so rough for Calcano this game.
Oof. Duress and Erebos in Miles' hand.
Yeah, and without mana up, there's nothing. Calcano can't counter it. This Erebos is going to take over the game. It makes his Sphinx worse. It's just not looking good for Calcano now. He has hope with that Elspeth, though. But
I think it's been looking bad for a while at this point. It's just one of those things where takes the Elspeth. That Dissolve is not going to mean much after this turn here because he's already going to have card draw engines and an Erebos in play already.
Miles laying down a Watery Graves. Looks like he's thinking of taking 2 or not. Does take 2. Combination of representing Negate possibly and also activating his Erebos if he wanted.
14 minutes.
Last breath, is it?
Yeah. Yep. Christian Calcano, was he laying the Jace? We're going to give some choices. What you got over there? Choices. Plains, Jace, and Azorius Charm. Not an incredible set of cards in this moment. Land or no, perhaps?
See, Miles looks like he's looking what he wants to pair the planes with.
I'll take the planes. Yep, and Christian Calcano agrees.
He was thinking a little bit there if he wanted a Zoria's Charm, possibly.
Yep.
As a pseudo answer to Erebos if it attacks ever. But
Miles Reed almost dead, but it doesn't really matter because we're going to see a Gray Merchant hit a Demon. No. I thought, the Demon instead of a Gray Merchant.
Yeah, Calcano without the double blue is unable to dissolve the Demon. Demon connections and the Erebos itself, enough devotion to turn it on. Sounds like we're nearing that game 3.
Mutavault comes out and dies.
Quickly devour flesh.
Are we going to last breath his... that wouldn't help him because there is an Erebos in play.
Okay, activates the other Mutavault.
There we go.
That.
Then he's able to block. This hurts his land situation pretty hugely, down to 5 only. Thoughtseize after the fact. Last breath. Dissolve Jace. You can see how ineffective... I mean, yes, he's taking that counterspell, but you can see how ineffective the counterspells have kind of been this game. Miles is just pushing through it with Underworld connections.
The only counterspell we saw was more of not a very powerful counterspell, just countered a Desecration Demon that wouldn't have meant too much at that point. Sure, a little pressure, but not too much.
D-Sphere or no would be the split I would make here, but there's an Azorius Charm, a land, and a Detention Sphere.
Yeah, Miles thinking again, what am I going to pair this land with? This time, it's going to be Azorius Charm.
D-Sphere it is. Goodbye cards to the bottom.
So we'll probably see Erebos go away.
There it goes.
One of the limited choices Calcano has to answer in Erebos.
Swings on in with these two characters. Last Breath takes care of that. Christian takes 6. Going to see a Gray Merchant here for 6. Puts Christian down to, I believe, 6.
And there's another Gray Merchant in Miles' hand. So without a counterspell drawn, Calcano would have been out of it, but it does look like he drew to dissolve. So he still has some fight left in him.
Well, he's got to answer the board still.
He still has to answer a Demon. So
yep.
I guess there isn't much left, and we're going to be seeing a game 3.
Yeah. If you're just joining us, I'm Adrian Sullivan, and here with Ray, at Ray DeStud, I'm at Adrian L. Sullivan on Twitter. The hashtag WMCQ for this whole weekend for catching up with all of the people, I think, everywhere playing in their World Magic Cup qualifiers.
Yeah, not just here in Indianapolis. You'll see everyone, and there's their updates seeing throughout the world who's qualifying for their respective teams. Much like the first game that we just saw, Calcano was pretty dominant for game 1. Miles was just pretty dominant all game 2. Maybe this game we'll see a little more seesaw in this matchup.
Well, I mean, one of the things, in my experience with various versions of blue-white versus black, blue-white has a big edge game 1, and a lot of the consensus is that black has the edge game 2 and 3. Oh. And a part of it is exactly what you saw, all of that discard. And I would say Miles Reed's build has even more weaponry than a traditional mono black deck. Those blue cards matter quite a bit.
So if we're saying that the mono black deck is favored games 2 and 3, what kind of game do we need to see from Calcano in order for him to take it down?
I think what has to happen is he has to draw a lot of cards and basically go 1 for 1 with all of the cards that Miles hits, and just Christian needs to be casting his Jaces and his Sphinx's Revelation. That's the only way that he's going to be able to, I think, recover from the discard that hits him. And then, should an Underworld connection hit play, he's got to get rid of it as soon as possible. Now, remember also, with 2 Erebos and 1 Notion Thief, there are other cards that Miles Reed can put down that are real problems for Christian Calcano. Notion Thief especially problematic because it can't be last breathed, and it can sneak in there as a surprise to steal those cards that Christian was counting on.
Yeah, exactly. And Calcano, though, he does have a lot of ways to close out the game. I mean, just hitting Aetherling and maybe the 2 Elspeths, if those get hit by discard spells, he doesn't have the elixir to recover them that many of the blue-white decks we've seen throughout the day and other tournaments are typically playing.
One of the strengths of the elixir deck in a matchup like this is that you can actually cast even that 3rd Revelations more often, because it's possible you've shuffled some back into your deck, and let alone casting your 4th, 5th, 6th Revelation. Typically, the blue-white deck without elixir almost never ends up casting a 4th one, and has no way of casting a 5th one.
Yeah, definitely no way on the 5th one.
Yeah.
But those 3rd and 4th ones are also very rare without the elixir in your deck. Especially with more and more lands in play, getting that high density of spells back in your deck really is nice for the blue-white deck. So definitely something to consider if anyone out there is looking to play blue-white.
I mean, you can count me firmly in Camp Elixir. I've written about that many times, but whatever the case may be, blue-white is still, it's like when you're playing a good blue-white list, whether it has Elixir or not, or whether it has other things or not, it's sort of like you're in this train, and even if the train is a little bit older and rickety, you still don't want to be somebody stepping in the way of it.
So Calcano looks like he keeps. Miles didn't get a good look at his hand, but land. He does have the Notion Thief.
Land, Notion Thief, negate, and a keep. Land go. Temple go or swamp go? We'll see. Reconsidering. Nope, swamp.
All right. So I know that Calcano's not playing the Quicken version, but what's your thoughts on that Quicken version?
I love Quicken. I don't think you need to go all in on 4 Quickens, but I do like Quicken. When I'm playing a Detention Sphere build, though, it can be sometimes hard to fill in all of the space with Quickens. Here we go. We see a Dissolve. We got a Mutavault, 2 lands. It's a total of 3 lands over there. On the other side, also 3 lands, one of them being a Mutavault. And notice the Nightveil Spectre that was not cast because of that Mutavault.
And we're seeing, let's see here, a couple Heroes Downfalls, Negates, Notion Thief, Nightveil Spectre, Gesture Duress on Miles' turn.
Duress you?
Oh, Calcano looks like he may be considering to dissolve at this point. Miles does have a negate if he really wants to force her to duress, though.
Yeah, when you're fighting on these terms, one of the reasons I find counterspells very hard is that unless you've got multiple... Ooh, he brought in the Gainsay. He saw the negate. He maybe imagines Notion Thief. Maybe he even knows Miles Reed enough to know that he has Notion Thief. That Watery Grave is a giveaway of some kind. But there's the Gainsay.
Oh, yeah. That's a few targets, but when he uses that Gainsay, it'll be key. I wouldn't be surprised if Calcano doesn't wait for a turn or he could Sphinx and play a Gainsay. Duress and Plains move to the back since they're untouchable with or Aetherling and Plains rather move back because they're untouchable by Duress. Can Miles be considering Gainsay here as it's a cheaper counter?
He does.
All right.
Land, go.
All right.
Christian has shown a willingness to not cast his card advantage spells in order to keep his counter magic up, which honestly I feel like plays in Miles Reed's favor. Miles has a ton of disruption.
We did see Calcano game 1 play his Sphinx Revelation on his turn, maybe already sensing something like a Notion Thief or something to just avoid something that might have happened on Miles' turn. So he may be looking to fire it off at a good opportunity once he can get maybe for 3-4 cards.
See a Temple here, drawn off of that Sign of Blood, leaves it right on top. Lots of good cards in Miles' hand. Christian decides not to go for 2, wants a little bit more than that. Draws a Supreme Verdict, I believe. There's a land, 6 mana total now.
And we'll pass the turn. Swamp for Miles' turn.
Looks like he's considering starting off with the Night Veil Spectre. Christian with Supreme Verdict in hand says okay. I think that was an okay.
Miles does have Underworld connections, but won't cast it. Pass the turn. Calcano holding that Sphinx. Is he deciding if he wants to play it now or not?
Here's Sphinx there, Aetherling there.
He could be considering maybe Sphinx, and even if it gets countered, if he draws the land, he could protect that Aetherling. Couple choices here. What is Calcano going to do?
He does do it for 3. This is an ideal spot to say no. And there's the no.
And Calcano just doesn't realize how happy he should be over that negate rather than the Notion Thief sitting in Miles' hand.
Christian Calcano, I don't think he found a land there. I think that here's going to be Jace probably with a minus to get cards.
Or is it that Supreme Verdict?
Verdict would be 1 more white mana in the mix.
Oh.
There's the Jace. He goes plus to shrink the Night Veil Spectre. That's just going to summon out a Hero's Downfall lickety split.
So Miles
attack
pumps it.
you, I bet. Me? Yes, you.
Calcano has Azorius Charm in his hand. He's going to send him back to the top of Miles' deck.
Back it goes.
And Miles will probably just fire off his Downfall here so that Calcano had minimal use of the Jace.
A Downfall and then a Connections. Connections first.
Ooh.
Says go.
Now, do you fire off the Downfall there in your turn?
I like that.
I mean,
This is very dangerous what's just happened. Christian Calcano could run away with this on the power of that Jace. That land is actually appealing because of the Aetherling in Christian's hand. Dissolve, though, is an awesome card. It takes the land. He missed a land drop last turn, but now he's got it.
yeah, Calcano realizes he's going to need as many lands as he can just to protect the Aetherling, as that sounds like it might be the path of victory.
And we have a card draw with the Connections. It's Connections versus Jace.
We know the Connections peeled him back the Night Veil Spectre that he had put on top of that. Calcano put on top of the deck. Draws a Thoughtseize for his turn. Leads off with Thoughtseize. All right, can Calcano protect this Aetherling, or is it going to hit the bin?
I think he's going to counterspell this card. It's just such a dangerous... I'm wrong. He's showing it.
All right.
Aetherling, Supreme Verdict, Dissolve, Syncopate, and a land.
I'm kind of surprised that Calcano did that there. It sounded like with the picking up of the 2 lands, he may have been gearing towards the Aetherling plan as soon as possible.
Depending on Miles' hand, I like taking the Aetherling, I guess, no matter what, honestly. But I could see arguments for any of the other spells. I prefer the Aetherling just because it could get out of hand. If it hits play, things could go wrong.
Oh, he takes the Dissolve.
Takes the Dissolve.
I was also thinking the Underworld Connection can also help him get around the other counter spells, you know, make Calcano use up his counter spells when he doesn't necessarily want to.
We see a Mutavault coming out.
WMCQ players, that is time in the round.
And I think we're just going to see 2 Mutavaults die.
With up to 5 additional turns. WMCQ players, that is time.
So will Miles fire off this Hero's Downfall now? Nope. Just going to let it be.
Upkeep hits the Jace with the Downfall. That's going to draw a Syncopate, or I believe a Syncopate here.
Yep.
Sync for 1. Negate is drawn. All of these cards.
So we're seeing last
Mutavault or no. Oh, he's thinking about that last breath.
This time around, which land gets last breath.
Need a vault or no?
Yep.
And he takes the bigger pile, last breath pile. There's a 7th mana. Next turn, he'll be able to cast Aetherling with 2 blue open.
Night Veil Spectre drawn on Miles' side. He's going to use connections on his turn.
I think Christian's actually looking to be in good shape now.
Yeah, and I think.
Oh, until the Thoughtseize happened.
Oh no.
Okay.
Thoughtseize.
Here we go. Thoughtseize.
Oh,
negate.
Negate. So really, it was that big turn where Miles decided not to downfall that Jace could have been just costly for him.
It was huge. It was huge. He's going to lose the game because of it. And here's going to be Aetherling.
Joseph Segretto or Segretto.
And there are 2 blue open. Miles is in a world of hurt.
Yep. All right, so we're seeing Night Veil Spectre in Miles' hand. He has a Desecration Demon. I mean, it's not. There's a Hero's Downfall too.
Let's draw a card. See what else we got.
Draws the Underworld Connections off the Underworld Connections activation. He has Hero's Downfall on the top of his hand.
Finally.
And he uses it.
Finally.
After Calcano's got a lot of value out of that Jace already. What we thought was going to happen right away happened, what was that, 3 turns later?
Yeah. I think it is fair to say that that decision cost Miles this game.
Yeah, and ultimately he traded that turn to to activate his Underworld Connections rather than get rid of Jace. Oh, and Jace's Ingenuity.
This is a choice between horrible and bad.
Yeah, I would almost given Calcano the Jace's Ingenuity with an extra card. He has a Notion Thief. That could be one of the ways he could get back into this game.
That's true.
If you want to get in on booster draft number 4, sign up at the registration stage.
And will Calcano do any pumping? No pumping.
Leaves himself as open as possible mana-wise. 13, still a 2-turn clock.
Miles draws a Duress. Plays the Night Veil Spectre.
Duress after the Night Veil. Clearly, I think he wanted the Night Veil to draw a counter.
Syncopate.
Christian Calcano 2 turns away from taking this.
Probably will just get rid of his Jace just to get extra protection into his hand.
There it goes.
Yeah, hoping to get like a Dissolve or a Negate.
Negate is just fine.
It's a type
Oh, jeez.
I think Calcano just takes a Negate.
Either way, honestly, the Negate is very good right now. But either way, these are 2 horrible decisions for Miles to have to deal with. And Christian's going to be able to figure out whichever one is, in his mind, going to be better in the moment. There's reasons for each. He goes your plan. He goes with the Negate. That's totally reasonable. Aetherling is going to be able to swing Miles down to a level that will result in his death on the next turn.
All right, let's see. Calcano
Here it comes.
Coming in there. He's going to do 1, 2. Setting a couple lands aside. Is he going to pump? He does have Elspeth in his hand, so.
This is your final call.
2.
Looks like he's just doing for a little bit.
With Elspeth, the tokens, and still being able to pump Aetherling next turn. There's lots of combinations of 2-turn clocks.
Just 1 is fine. Gets Miles down to 8. That means the Aetherling will be lethal without help next turn, but it's possible he'll give it some help. And here's the help. Yep. A match made in heaven. Aetherling and Elspeth. And now Miles is basically forced to draw a card to hope for something. He has not been drawing cards previous to this for a couple of turns now. There are those missing lands that he didn't get.
There it is. Though, honestly, I feel like Miles had the tools to win this game.
I think he should have.
Yeah. He had everything he wanted. His draws seemed quite strong.
And that is a drain for 6. That is keeping Miles a little bit more around. Here comes the Night Veil Spectre. It hits. What's it going to get? A land. Well, you already laid a land. I think he already laid a land. Unless there's 2 swamps in his hand.
Yeah. I think he laid a land as well.
If he's got 2 swamps in his hand, then he has not. But I'm pretty sure he already laid that land. In comes the team. Little guys. One of them gets blocked. Aetherling comes on through. Lots of damage.
So let's see. What can Miles do? If he draws another Gray Merchant, that will bring the Gray Merchants, that'd be 8. 7, 8, 9. Oh, but there's a Supreme Verdict.
Ouch.
Calcano did hide his Aetherling.
After combat recreates the friends. And there's a detention sphere for the Underworld connections. One last draw from Miles Reed.
Aetherling comes back. All right, and Swamp drawn for his turn. That whole game, that Notion Thief has been sitting in his hand. As sweet as it sounded like it was going to be, just did not do anything.
Yeah.
Desecration Demon does not care. I mean, Calcano doesn't care about Desecration Demon.
Yeah, and he definitely laid 2 lands on that turn because there were 2 swamps in his hand, and he drew a land, and yeah. I don't think it matters, but here comes the troops. He shrinks the Aetherling. He minuses the Elspeth. Hero's Downfall is a fog, but no, it's a counterspell. He's saying, I just want you dead. There you go.
Calcano, congratulations. Calcano advancing to 4-0.